And in a moment, we'll hear from Rory Challens in occupied East Jerusalem. He's following developments in Israel. But first, let's cross over to Hani Mahmoud. He's standing by for us in Rafah in southern Gaza. Let's start with the situation at the Nasser Hospital, where patients have been dying because of basics like oxygen and electricity being cut. What's the situation looking like this morning?
Yes, Sammy, one more patient died in the ICU as a result of power outage and depletion of oxygen. All of this happened after 19 days of military siege of the hospital, in which fuel was not delivered to the health facilities to sustain its operations, as well as no medical supplies were allowed to enter, as the military and its invading forces, along with the armored vehicles and the tanks, were surrounding the area. We're looking at now an entire health facility, the largest in the city of Khan Younis, has been pushed out of service completely, with the vast majority of people were ordered to evacuate as of yesterday. But as they were making their way out of the hospital, they were forced to go through checkpoints and detailed security check, and they were fired at and shot at to the point where the entire population of sheltering inside the hospital experienced large deal of a trauma and terror as they're making their way out of the hospital. As of now, those who with the critical injuries, the patients with the chronic disease, life-threatening conditions are at risk of losing their lives, including those newly born babies in incubation without electricity and without the supply of oxygen. There is a risk of losing their life. The coming hours are very critical as long as there is no immediate intervention to stop the military actions inside the hospital.
And Hani, tell us about the latest airstrikes where you are in Rafah.
Yes, one more tough night for the displaced population in Rafah city, and this is not the first time Rafah has been targeted. In the past, targeted repeatedly. More residential homes being targeted, more public facilities and infrastructure. The eastern part of the city is regularly targeted by heavy artillery shelling, and what seemed to be a continuation of the Israeli military plan of clearing the area for the establishment of a buffer zone. But overnight attacks targeted the central area of Rafah as well as the northern part of the city. 2 residential homes full of displaced individuals. Up to 2 families were inside these residential homes. The number has reached, as of early hours this morning, to 11 people. There is a risk of those with the critical injuries, with Rafah having a very insufficient medical and healthcare facilities. There is a risk of these people losing their lives, as there aren't many enough doctors inside the hospital. The extreme shortage of medical supplies make it very difficult to save lives at these particularly unusual, difficult times.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thanks so much. Let's go over now to Rory Challens. He's in occupied East Jerusalem. So what are the Israelis saying about what's happening at Nasser Hospital?
Well, the latest statement from Daniel Hagari, who's the Israeli army spokesperson, is that this operation inside Nasser Hospital has led to the arrest of dozens of what he calls terrorists and the discovery of weapons, including grenades and mortar bombs. He says that amongst the people that they've arrested in the hospital were some which the Israelis claim were involved in the October the 7th attacks, the October the 7th massacres inside Israel. They also say that there's credible evidence that the Hamas organization has been keeping the bodies of some of the Israeli captives that were taken back to Gaza in the hospital, and that's what they've got in to look for as well. Now, they haven't produced any of these bodies yet. No evidence presented so far that that is true. But that's one of the justifications they've given for this operation, which they're calling precise and limited. They say that they have no intention of shutting down the hospital as a functioning medical facility, that there's no obligation on the civilians and the medical staff to evacuate, and that they say they have no intention of harming innocent civilians. Of course, if you've been watching our coverage of this for the last couple of days, hearing from Hani just then and from people who've been inside the hospital, much of what the Israelis are saying is very much at odds with the kind of reporting that we've been getting from on the ground.
And Rory, talking about messaging, what kind of messaging is coming from the US at this point with that Biden phone call to Netanyahu?
Yeah, well, there's no love lost between Netanyahu and Biden. Hasn't been for a good period of time. But the rifts in that relationship, I think, are becoming more and more apparent. The Biden administration wants a deal. It wants a ceasefire. It wants an exchange of captives, prisoners, etc. And it wants a wider settlement for the Middle East. It's been trying to push the Israelis to take the Cairo negotiations seriously. And I think there's frustration within Biden's administration that so far they haven't been. So there is pressure being put on Netanyahu. The CIA boss, Bill Burns, has been here in the last couple of days to speak to people in Israel. He has also, Biden has had a phone call, as you mentioned there, Sammy, with Netanyahu late last night, 40 minutes long apparently. And what they talked about, a potential ceasefire deal. And the readout from the White House says that Joe Biden again reiterated his position that there should be no Israeli military incursion into Rafah without a proper deal, a proper plan for the civilians there. But Netanyahu insisting that he is going to carry on with that Rafah plan.
All right, thanks so much, Rory Challens.